Hey, tonight we're slipping into the shadows of history, into the stories that end not with answers, but with silence. We're talking about the people who vanished without a trace. No goodbyes, no explanations, just gone. From ancient kings to modern hikers, entire villages to lone travelers, history is full of disappearances that defy logic and resist closure. And the most unsettling part? Some of them were never even investigated properly. If you're into this kind of late-night journey through the strange and unsettling, drop a like or hit subscribe. It really helps keep this going. And hey, I always love knowing where you're listening from. Drop your city and local time in the comments. Let's build this little global campfire together. Now dim the lights, settle into something cozy, and let the quiet hum of the night pull you in, because tonight we're exploring the greatest unsolved disappearances in history and the haunting questions they left behind. Royalty isn't supposed to vanish. They're meant to live loudly and die historically, with portraits, marble tombs, and Wikipedia pages that go on forever. But sometimes, even those crowned in gold slip into the fog, leaving behind coronets without heads, palaces without ghosts, and just enough mystery to keep historians arguing through the night. These are the ones who didn't just lose power or face scandal. They disappeared literally, politically, or spiritually. And the holes they left behind were shaped like crowns, thrones, or velvet-trimmed coats no one else wanted to wear. Let's start with Louis Le Prince. You might not know his name, but you've definitely lived in his legacy. He was the man who invented motion pictures filming, moving images, years before Edison or the Lumiere brothers ever touched a camera. In 1890, just before he was about to demonstrate his invention to the public and possibly change entertainment history forever, Louis boarded a train from Dijon to Paris. He never arrived. No one saw him again. His luggage? Gone. His body? Also gone. No signs of violence, no accident report. His son later died under mysterious circumstances as well, just before testifying in a legal battle over film patent rights. Some believe Edison may have orchestrated the vanishing act. Hollywood was born in shadows, after all. But no proof ever surfaced. Louis Le Prince was simply erased. And movies went on without him, as if the father of film had been edited out of his own creation. Then there's Princess Anastasia. The Romanovs were executed in 1918 by Bolshevik revolutionaries, shot, stabbed, and buried in unmarked graves. But the youngest daughter, Anastasia, didn't stay buried, or so the legend goes. Whispers began almost immediately that one of the Tsar's daughters had survived, that she'd escaped the bullets, crawled out of the grave, or been spirited away by loyalists. Over the years, women across Europe came forward claiming to be the lost princess. The most famous was Anna Anderson, whose identity was fiercely defended and fiercely denied for decades. It wasn't until 2007 that DNA confirmed the grim truth. Anastasia had died with her family. The myth was finally laid to rest, but not really. Because in the public imagination, Anastasia is still alive somewhere, twirling in a music box, a royal echo that refuses to fade. Let's rewind further back to the princes in the tower. In 1483, two young brothers, Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury, were placed in the Tower of London by their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement before Edward's coronation. Then Richard declared himself king, becoming Richard III. The boys? Never seen again. They simply vanished. No official announcement, no funeral, no confirmed bodies. Decades later, two small skeletons were found beneath a staircase in the tower, and everyone nodded grimly. Must be them. Probably. Maybe. Theories abound: murdered by their uncle, poisoned by rivals, smuggled away, and raised in secret. Shakespeare didn't help, writing Richard III as a hunchbacked villain who cackled while snuffing out nephews. But the truth? Still trapped in stone walls and centuries of royal denial. It's bedtime in the dungeon, and no one ever woke up. Now cross the sea to Mexico, where Empress Carlota of Belgium played Empress for a brief, doomed moment. She was married to Maximilian I, a European noble installed as Emperor of Mexico by French interests in 1864. Carlota took the role seriously writing policies, attending state events, learning Spanish, but Mexico was not exactly enthusiastic about being ruled by imported royalty. As rebellion grew, Carlota sailed back to Europe to plead for help. She begged Napoleon III to intervene. He politely ignored her. She appealed to the Pope. He nodded and gave her a glass of water. That's when something inside Carlota broke. She began hearing voices, accusing servants of poisoning her, locking herself in rooms. She would never return to Mexico. She lived the rest of her life 6 decades, a shadow in a Belgian palace, still technically empress of a country that had long since forgotten her. Her disappearance wasn't physical, but psychological. The crown stayed, but the queen disappeared inside her own mind. And then, of course, there's King Ludwig II of Bavaria. The Mad King, the man who built castles that looked like Disney fever dreams and spent most of his reign avoiding politics in favor of architecture and moonlit boat rides. In 1886, his ministers had enough. Declaring him insane, they placed him under house arrest in his beloved Neuschwanstein castle. A few days later, Ludwig went for a walk with his psychiatrist. Hours passed. They didn't return. Both were found floating in Lake Starnberg. No witnesses, no struggle. The doctor's watch had stopped at 6:54 p.m. Ludwig's coat was buttoned wrong, which for a famously vain monarch was suspicious. The official cause? Suicide by drowning. But Ludwig was a strong swimmer, and there was no water in his lungs. Conspiracies bloomed. Assassination? Cover-up? An escape gone wrong? His death gave Bavaria the political stability it needed. His castles gave us Instagram backgrounds. But Ludwig himself? He's still out there, somewhere in the mist, wandering between madness and monarchy. These vanishings aren't just historical trivia. They're royalty stepping off the edge of their own stories. Some left behind empty thrones. Others left behind confusion, conspiracy, and the kind of unresolved silence that gets louder with time. Maybe power doesn't protect you from disappearance. Maybe it just makes the mystery more interesting. Either way, their crowns are still waiting dusty, tarnished, and perfectly shaped to fit the heads that never came back. Explorers have this funny habit of walking right out of history. One moment they're hoisting flags, mapping rivers, chewing on stale biscuits, and the next, they're vapor. Maybe it's the call of the unknown. Maybe it's bad weather, bad luck, or just one too many uncharted locations. Either way, the rule seems to be, go far enough into the map's blank spaces, and you might not come back out. This chapter is dedicated to those who dared to step off the edge and never quite stepped back on. We start in the Amazon, where Percy Fawcett, proper British explorer, with a mustache as determined as his jawline, went looking for a lost city he called Z. In 1925, he and his son disappeared somewhere deep in the jungle. He believed Z was the ruins of an ancient, advanced civilization hidden beneath centuries of vines and myth. His last letter home was optimistic. Then, silence. No radio, no footprints, not a single tea tin left behind. Over 100 people died trying to find him. Some say he was killed by tribes. Others say he found the city and stayed. A few even whisper that he went mad and started his own jungle cult. The jungle never coughed up an answer. And Z, whatever it was, remains as elusive as Percy himself, just another dream in the canopy. Then there's Roald Amundsen, the Norwegian legend who beat everyone to the South Pole and then, years later, tried to save a rival explorer lost in the Arctic. In 1928, he boarded a small seaplane with 5 other men and vanished over the frozen sea. No distress call, no wreckage, nothing but wind and endless white. For a man so skilled at surviving extremes, his disappearance felt almost supernatural, like the North simply took him back. Decades later, parts of his plane might have been found in the Barents Sea, but it wasn't enough. No body, no goodbye. The man who once mapped the edges of the earth had become part of its mystery. The Poles don't forget, but they don't share much either. And who could forget Sir John Franklin, who led a doomed expedition in 1845 to find the Northwest Passage? Two ships, the Erebus and the Terracet, sail with over 100 men, enough supplies for years, and a piano for morale. They were last seen entering the Arctic ice. After that, the world waited. And waited. Rescue parties found relics, notes, boots, some bones, but the full story didn't come out until modern times, thanks to Inuit oral history, forensic analysis, and the eventual discovery of the sunken ships in the 2010s. Turns out they got stuck in the ice. The crew tried to march south. Some starved, some froze. Some possibly resorted to cannibalism. It took over 150 years for the truth to surface. And even now, there's a feeling that something vital is still missing. Maybe it's Franklin himself. Maybe it's just closure. Now back up a few decades to the fate of Jean-François de Galaup, the Comte de la Pérouse. In 1785, he was France's answer to Captain Cook, charting coastlines, drawing maps, being impeccably French at sea. Then in 1788, after stopping in Australia, he and his two ships simply disappeared. No distress call, no journal, nothing. It took nearly 40 years for anyone to find a clue. Eventually, islanders in the South Pacific led investigators to a reef where two European ships had wrecked. Artifacts matched La Pérouse's gear. It seemed the crews may have survived the wreck, only to vanish again on land. Did they blend into local populations? Die trying to escape? Get picked off by illness or violence or sheer despair? The ships were found. The story wasn't. And then there's the USS Cyclops, a U.S. Navy cargo ship that disappeared in 1918 while sailing through the Bermuda Triangle. Over 300 people on board. One of the largest non-combat losses of life in U.S. Navy history. No SOS, no wreckage, not even an oil slick. Some blamed storms, others blamed sabotage. Some whispered about mutiny or German submarines, but most people just latched onto the word triangle and nodded grimly. It's one thing when one person disappears. It's another when an entire steel ship, nearly 550 feet long, simply blinks out of existence. The ocean floor is probably hiding something. But until it gives it up, the Cyclops is just one more ghost in the water. What all these stories share beyond fog, failure, and frostbite eyes, the sense that exploration doesn't always mean return. These were people trained for hardship, built for risk. They had maps, compasses, backup plans, and still they vanished. Not into thin air, exactly, but into a kind of historical static. Like a radio signal that once crackled with confidence and then just went silent. No explanation, just static. And yet, maybe that's part of the allure. The idea that some places are still bigger than us. That there are corners of the world where even the most prepared can be swallowed whole. And all that's left are legends, search parties, and the quiet certainty that even now, out there in the cold or the green or the blue, something still waits. Writers are supposed to disappear into their work, not into thin air. They leave behind words, not footprints. But some of the most brilliant minds in literature and art have a funny way of pulling off the greatest vanishing acts. No curtain drop, no grand finale, just a final paragraph followed by ellipses that never resolve. Whether it was chasing revolution, fleeing disappointment, or just stepping one too many times into the margins of their own minds, these creators didn't just fade away. They ghosted history with style. Take Ambrose Bierce, for example. He was a Civil War veteran, journalist, and author, with a razor-sharp wit and a talent for crafting short horror stories that stuck to your bones. His most famous work, The Devil's Dictionary, redefined cynicism in dictionary form, like calling love a temporary insanity curable by marriage. In 1913, Bierce, then in his 70s, announced he was heading to Mexico to cover Pancho Villa's revolution. He wrote letters along the way, full of wit and whiskey, and then nothing. Somewhere near Chihuahua, he evaporated. No body, no last article, No body of work mailed back posthumously. One of his final notes read, "To be a gringo in Mexico, that is euthanasia." Whether he died by firing squad, fever, or some poetic twist of fate remains unknown. But if anyone could script his own mysterious ending, it was Bierce. Then there's Barbara Newhall Follett. She was a literary prodigy who published her first novel at age 12. Whimsical lyrical tale about a girl who runs away into a fantasy world. Critics compared her to Lewis Carroll. She was the future of American letters. And then life did what it does, it complicated. Her father left. Her family went broke. She married young and struggled to find her footing in a world that didn't quite care about child prodigies once they aged out of being adorable. In 1939, at the age of 25, Barbara walked out of her apartment after an argument with her husband. She left behind no money, no ID, no suitcase. Just vanished. Her mother filed a missing person report 4 years later. There are no confirmed sightings, no death certificates. Just this faint literary trace, like the echo of a typewriter tapping away in another world. Weldon Keys was the kind of poet who felt like he was always halfway out the door anyway. He wrote verse that buzzed with existential dread and mid-century malaise, painted moody abstracts, composed jazz, and reviewed art for the New York Times. He was brilliant and disillusioned. In 1955, his car was found abandoned on the Golden Gate Bridge. The keys were in the ignition. The engine was cold. His wallet and sleeping bag were gone. Suicide was the obvious guess he'd spoken about jumping. But then again, he'd also talked about moving to Mexico. Some friends believe he made the leap. Others think he made a quieter escape, maybe even found a new name and a sunnier coastline. Weldon once wrote, "The door swings open. Someone looks in. And maybe that someone was him, stepping out of his own life for good." And then there's B. Traven. Not a disappearance, exactly, but an author who never quite appeared in the first place. He wrote The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, among other novels, and was beloved for his gritty stories of rebellion and injustice in Mexico. But no one could say for sure who he was. His publisher claimed he was an American named Traven Torsvin. Others believed he was a German anarchist named Rhett Marut, who fled after World War I. Still others swore he was the ghostwriter for someone even more obscure. Traven refused interviews. He refused photographs. He once said, "The writer is unimportant. His work counts." When John Huston made The Treasure of the Sierra Madre into a film, a man showed up on set, claiming to be Traven's translator. Huston suspected he was actually the man himself. The real B. Traven never confirmed it. His identity is still up for debate, even in death. A writer who wrote himself out of existence and never let us read the last page. And then there's Oscar Zeta Acosta, the real-life model for Hunter S. Thompson's Dr. Gonzo. A towering figure literally and politically, Acosta was a Chicano activist, lawyer, and novelist. He fought police brutality, defended the marginalized, and wrote searing, surreal memoirs of his experiences. But the public mostly knows him as the wild, half-mythic sidekick in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. In 1974, he boarded a flight to Mexico, told friends he was going to find some good drugs. Then poof, gone. No passport re-entry, no confirmed sightings. Thompson claimed Acosta probably got in a fight on a beach and was thrown overboard. Others say he disappeared on purpose, tired of the chaos, tired of being the side character in someone else's story. Maybe he wanted to escape the role Hunter had written for him. Maybe he just found peace and anonymity in a country where nobody called him Gonzo. Each of these vanishings is different, but they share a strange elegance. These weren't people who stumbled off cliffs or wandered into bad weather. They were minds burning bright, and then burning out, some intentionally, some tragically. They disappeared not with screams or headlines, but with mystery, subtext, and the kind of trailing punctuation that makes you wonder if maybe the story isn't over after all. Because sometimes the final act isn't death, it's disappearance, a clean break from the narrative. a blank page after the final chapter. Not an ending, but an invitation for us to keep imagining where they went, what they saw, and why they left the rest of us reading in the dark. There's something uniquely eerie about a vehicle that simply doesn't arrive. Not crashing in a fireball, not limping in with engine trouble, just vanishing. Gone. Like the road, the sky, or the sea opened up and whispered, "Nope, not today." Whether it's a single-seat aircraft or a squadron of bombers, whether it's a famous musician or a kid on a solo flight, these are the departures that became permanent. And all they leave behind is a radio transmission, a half-finished map, and a ghost trail no one's ever quite been able to follow. Take Amelia Earhart, the original high-flying legend. By 1937, she was already the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, a global celebrity with a killer leather jacket. Her next goal? Circumnavigate the globe. Easy, right? She made it most of the way before she and her navigator, Fred Noonan, disappeared over the Pacific. The last confirmed radio contact was calm, procedural even boring, then static. They were expected to land on tiny Howland Island. They never showed up. Theories exploded, that they crashed and sank, that they were captured by the Japanese, that she lived out her life as a castaway, or even under a new identity. Bones were found decades later on a nearby island. Maybe hers, maybe not. No wreckage has ever been conclusively tied to her plane. What we're left with is a woman halfway around the world, halfway through a flight, and halfway between myth and history. Then there's Glenn Miller, big band leader, swing-era heartthrob, the man behind In the Mood and Moonlight Serenade. In December 1944, he boarded a small military aircraft in England, headed to Paris to entertain U.S. troops. It was a routine flight in calm weather. The plane was never seen again. Not a single piece of wreckage washed ashore. No distress call, just a whole lot of music left hanging in the air. Some speculate that his plane flew into jettisoned bombs from returning Allied aircraft. Others whisper about espionage and secret missions. Most just agree. One day he was here, the next, the band kept playing but without its leader. And then there's Frederick Valentich, a 20-year-old pilot in Australia who radioed Melbourne Air Traffic Control in October 1978 with a strange report. He said there was an object hovering above him, shiny, metallic, and moving erratically. He said his plane was behaving oddly. Then came his last words. "It's not an aircraft." And then, silence. No mayday, no crash site. Just a single transmission that reads like a cliffhanger from a sci-fi script. UFO theorists embraced it immediately. Skeptics said it was likely disorientation, maybe even a hoax. But Frederick was never found. His plane was never found. Just an empty patch of sky over the Bass Strait, and one of the weirdest aviation cases in modern history. Jim Sullivan wasn't flying, but his story fits the pattern. In 1975, he was a struggling musician with a cult following, known for his haunting folk rock album UFO. Yes, that was the actual title. It was full of desert imagery and lyrics about strange disappearances. Then one day, Jim left Los Angeles in his Volkswagen Beetle, heading for Nashville and a new life. He checked into a motel in New Mexico. Didn't sleep there. The next day, he was seen walking into the desert. His car was found abandoned, guitar still inside, along with all his possessions. Jim was never seen again. It was like he stepped into the exact narrative he'd been singing about. Some say he was murdered. Others believe he suffered a breakdown. The rest wonder if art imitated life, or the other way around. And finally, we have Flight 19, the Bermuda Triangle's favorite bedtime story. In December 1945, 5 Navy torpedo bombers went out on a routine training mission from Fort Lauderdale. They never came back. Radio transmissions revealed confusion compasses not working, landmarks not recognizable, the sense that something was wrong but no one knew what. The lead pilot's last known statement, "We are entering white water. Nothing seems right. We don't know where we are. The water is green, no white." a rescue plane was dispatched. It also vanished. No wreckage from either group has been conclusively recovered. People blame the Bermuda Triangle, electromagnetic anomalies, underwater gas eruptions, or just bad navigation. But none of it fully explains how 6 aircraft and 27 men could simply cease to exist without a trace. The connecting thread here isn't just transportation, it's transition. All these people were moving towards something, a destination, a dream, a duty, and yet none of them arrived. They became pauses in motion, floating commas in history. There's something particularly unsettling about that. A forward momentum interrupted permanently. No final landing, no crash site, just movement turned into myth. And for every theory, there's always a lingering absence. The ocean swallows. The desert keeps its secrets. The sky never says sorry. All we can do is trace the flight path, listen to the last song, play back the final radio calendar, wonder what it's like to disappear mid-journey. Not with a bang, not with a scream, but with the soft closing of a door that was never meant to be opened in the first place. Cities aren't supposed to vanish, not whole civilizations either. They're made of stone and sweat and systems, with marketplaces and mothers and drainage networks. And yet, history is littered with the eerie silence of places that were once loud and alive then. Nothing, not slowly decaying into ruin, not conquered in a blaze of finality. Just disappeared, often without leaving behind so much as a signature. Some were swallowed by jungle or sea, others by time and indifference. And some? Well, they walked off stage like they knew the show was over long before the audience did. Let's start with Roanoke, the lost colony. In 1587, a group of English settlers established a foothold on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what's now North Carolina. Supplies were short, tensions with local tribes were high, and within a few years, the colony's governor, John White, sailed back to England for help. But by the time he returned, the settlement was gone. No people, no struggle, no skeletons. Just one word carved into a post: Crotone. That was the name of a nearby island and a tribe, but there was no clear path to follow. Did they assimilate? Die off? Relocate? The mystery has launched centuries of theories, from massacre to migration to aliens, if you're feeling frisky. But there's still no definitive answer. Roanoke didn't leave a body, it left a question mark, faintly scratched into a tree. Far older and far more sophisticated was the Indus Valley civilization. Flourishing around 2500 BCE, it sprawled across what's now Pakistan and northwest India. The cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa had grids, plumbing, complex trade systems, and standardized weights while most of Europe was still figuring out fire. And yet, by 1900 BCE, it was gone, not conquered, not collapsed in fire, just phased out. Climate change? Shifting rivers? Trade breakdown? We don't really know. Even worse, we can't read their script. Thousands of beautifully carved seals and tablets remain, but not one has been definitively deciphered. It's like they left behind the key to their story, but forgot to teach us how to use it. A vanished civilization, still politely refusing to explain itself. Then there are the ancestral Puebloans, sometimes called the Anasazi, though that term has fallen out of favor. These were the people who built towering dwellings into cliff faces across the American Southwest, particularly at places like Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde. Their architecture was remarkable. Circular kivas, multi-story buildings, elaborate road saw built without metal tools or pack animals. They lived there for centuries, and then, by around 1300, they were gone. Theories include drought, resource depletion, warfare, or cultural transformation. Maybe they just moved and became other tribes we now know by different names. But there's something haunting about those empty stone cities tucked into cliffsides, like they're still waiting for the inhabitants to come back from a long errand that never ended. Let's not forget the Olmecone of Mesoamerica's earliest and most enigmatic civilizations, best known for those giant stone heads that weigh several tons and somehow look like they're silently judging you. The Olmecs flourished between 1200 and 400 BCE and then disappeared. Their cities fell quiet. Their influence, however, echoed forward. They left behind art, ritual ideas, even ball games that later civilizations like the Maya and Aztecs picked up and ran with. But the Olmecs themselves? Gone. No dramatic end, just a slow fade into history's background, like someone pulled the curtain mid-scene and never reopened it. Their heads remain lined up like forgotten busts in a museum, staring into nothing, heavy, hollow-eyed, and mute. And then, of course, there's Atlantis, the lost city that has launched 1,000 documentaries, countless conspiracy theories, and at least 3 really bad movies. First mentioned by Plato around 360 BCE, Atlantis was described as a powerful, advanced civilization that sank into the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. Most scholars believe he made it an allegory for hubris and divine punishment, but people have been trying to find it ever since. Is it under the Mediterranean? Somewhere near the Bahamas? Antarctica even? Atlantis has become the patron saint of lost causes, probably fictional. But then again, what if not? Every now and then, a theory crops up with enough poetry to feel real. Because Atlantis, at its core, isn't just a sunken island. It's the dream of an entire world lost to time. And maybe that's why we keep searching. What ties all these stories together beyond geography and timeys? That eerie absence of finality. We don't get a conclusion, just a fade-out. Cities built to last forever that didn't. Cultures that thrived and then ghosted us, leaving only fragments, a ceramic shard, a wall, a word. They remind us that even the biggest, brightest, best organized societies can just go away. Not with a bang, not even with a whispered just silence where once there was song. History's graveyard isn't full of headstones, it's full of gaps. And in those gaps live the vanished, not truly dead, not fully gone, just out of reach. Waiting in the dust, in the deep, in the corners of maps, labeled with a shrug, unknown. Some people disappear in ways that feel less like tragedy and more like myth. They don't just go missing, they ascend, dissolve, walk into the mist with a wink and a verse. Their stories live on in scripture, scrolls, and sermons, sometimes centuries after anyone last saw them. These are the vanishings that blur the line between faith and folklore. The prophets, mystics, and spiritual outliers who didn't die, they departed, often without explanation, sometimes with fireworks, always leaving behind more questions than answers. Let's begin with the 3 Nephitessan unusual trio from Mormon tradition. According to the Book of Mormon, these 3 disciples were granted a special blessing by Jesus himself to remain on earth, immortal and hidden, until the second coming. Essentially, eternal undercover agents of divine kindness. They pop up in stories like spiritual hitchhikers, helping a lost traveler, fixing a flat tire, rescuing someone from a river and then vanishing before you can say, "Are you angels?" The Nephites are like spiritual cryptids. You don't meet one, you hear about someone who knows someone who did. They're proof that in some theologies, disappearing is just part of the job description. Then there's Elijah, the original firebrand prophet. The Hebrew Bible tells us he didn't die, he was taken up into heaven in a whirlwind, riding a chariot of fire. Pretty metal. Elijah's exit was witnessed by his successor, Elisha, who got his cloak and a double portion of prophetic mojo in return. The story's been interpreted in countless ways. Literal ascension, visionary metaphor, ancient special effects. What's certain is that Elijah's departure made an impression. So much so that in Jewish tradition, Elijah is said to return before the Messiah. He even has a seat at every Passover table, just in case. Not bad for a guy who left on a flaming rideshare with no return itinerary. Zoroaster, also known as Zarathustrawas, the founder of Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic faiths. He lived somewhere between 1500 and 500 BCE. depending on which scholar you ask. He preached about dualism, good versus evil, light versus dark. He likely influenced Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But for such a pivotal figure, his death is a blank space. Some legends claim he was murdered by invading forces while praying. Others suggest he simply disappeared after finishing his teachings. Gone, like a teacher stepping out of the classroom once the lesson is over. No tomb, no shrine, just wisdom, fire temples, and a lot of unanswered emails. Moses is the face of Exodus, the mountain climber of Sinai, and the man who allegedly split the Red Sea like a curtain, but his final moments are oddly quiet. The Bible says he climbed Mount Nebo, saw the promised land from a distance, and died there alone. God himself buried Moses, and no man knows the place of his burial to this day. A poetic end for someone who led such a thunderous life. Some scholars interpret this as symbolic, others see it as a statement. Even great leaders fade into mystery. And then there's the enduring fringe theory that Moses didn't die the ascended, like Elijah, quietly stepping from earth to eternity without so much as a gravestone. And finally, Bodhidharma, the monk who brought Zen Buddhism from India to China in the 5th or 6th century. His story is full of legend. He meditated facing a cave wall for 9 years, supposedly tore off his eyelids to stay awake, and they sprouted tea plants, of course, and passed on his teachings to a single disciple with the kind of dramatic tests only monks would endure. But Bodhidharma's exit? Mysterious. Some say he walked back west, never to be seen again. Others believe he died and was buried. Still, others claim he was seen crossing a mountain pass after his death, one shoe slung over his shoulder, smiling like someone who just finished a joke nobody else gets. His body was later exhumed supposedly empty. Classic Zen. These disappearances aren't like the tragic vanishing of a hiker or the unsolved riddle of a crashed plane. They are elevated sometimes literally, wrapped in layers of meaning, miracle, and metaphor. They're less about where the person went, and more about what the absence means. In many cases, the disappearance itself becomes the final sermon, a gesture, a punctuation mark at the end of a life spent pointing towards something bigger than self. They left no forwarding address, these prophets and pilgrims, but they linger in the way that true mysteries Tao whispered in scripture, echoed in ritual, invoked in times of doubt. They remind us that some exits are more powerful than entrances, that sometimes the most enduring legacies are the ones that walk out the door and never look back. Ships aren't supposed to just disappear. They're made of timber and steel, packed with cargo and crew, tracked by maps and stars. They're big, loud, hard to miss. And yet the sea has a way of erasing them gently, sometimes cruelly with a shiver of fog or a shift in current. These aren't tales of violent wrecks or tragic storms. These are the ships that were found adrift, found too late, or never found at all. Silent decks, empty lifeboats, plates still set for meals that no one ever came back to eat. And always, the creeping sense that something unnatural followed them into the mist. Take the Mary Celeste, the patron saint of ghost ships. In 1872, she was found drifting aimlessly in the Atlantic, sails up but ragged, cargo untouched, the crew gone. No struggle, no sign of a storm. The captain's log ended abruptly. Food was still in the galley. Laundry was folded. There was even a sewing machine mid-stitch. Lifeboat missing. Theories range from mutiny to pirates to sea monsters to alcohol fumes causing spontaneous evacuation. But nothing fits perfectly. It's as if the crew simply walked off the edge of the ship into thin air. The Mary Celeste has haunted maritime minds ever since. The textbook case of a vessel that kept sailing long after its story stopped. Then there's the Carol A. Deering, which washed ashore in 1921 on the coast of North Carolina. A 5-masted schooner, she was found grounded on Diamond Shoals, perfectly upright, sails still set, but no crew, no personal belongings, lifeboats gone. The galley had soup on the stove. A meal had clearly been interrupted. The logbook and navigational tools were missing. And that's it. The Coast Guard investigated everything from mutiny to Bolshevik sabotage to paranormal interference. Even Edgar Allan Poe might have said, "Okay, that's a bit much." The ship had no good reason to be where it was, and the crew had even less reason to be gone. They just weren't there anymore. The HMS Resolute, oddly enough, reversed the trope. In 1854, she was abandoned in Arctic ice. The crew made it out alive, but the ship was presumed lost forever. Except it wasn't. A year later, it was found drifting in the open sea by an American whaling ship, neatly preserved and empty. No signs of damage. Like it had simply waited for someone to pick it up. In a gesture of diplomacy, the U.S. refurbished the vessel and returned it to Britain. Pieces of it were eventually turned into a deskies. That desk, the one in the Oval Office. A piece of ghost ship history, now holding presidential pens. Because why not haunt geopolitics too? The SS Waratah had no such polite ending. Dubbed Australia's Titanic, it vanished in 1909 with 211 people aboard, somewhere between Durban and Cape Town. It was a state-of-the-art passenger liner, barely a year old. Weather was reportedly fine when it left. Then nothing. No wreckage. No distress call. No survivors. One ship's captain claimed to see a mysterious vessel struggling in the distance that day, but by the time he reached the spot, there was only sea. Searches were launched. Rewards were offered. Rumors flew. Maybe it capsized suddenly. Maybe it was dragged under by a rogue wave. Over a century later, still no trace. It's like the Waratah simply blinked out of reality and took its passengers with it. Then there's the MV Joyita. In 1955, this small trading ship vanished on a short voyage between Samoa and the Tokelau Islands. 5 weeks later, it was found adrift, partially submerged, more ghost than ship. All 25 people aboard were gone. The radios had been tuned to emergency frequencies. Medical supplies were scattered everywhere. The ship's cargo was mostly intact, but the lifeboats were missing. Most chilling. The Joyita was built with enough buoyant material to make her unsinkable. And yet, something happened, something that caused everyone on board to abandon ship despite that knowledge. Sunstroke, mutiny, pirates, paranormal panic. Theories abound, but none explain the eerie calm of the aftermath. It was as if the sea had just decided to hollow the ship out and return it as a message. Each of these maritime mysteries shares the same unsettling mood, an absence where there should be people. Ships are meant to carry us. They're vessels of purpose, movement, direction. But these ones returned without their stories, or they didn't return at all. The sea took the endings and left us with open questions and half-digested rumors. Sailors gone without sound. Vessels gliding into the fog like stagehands vanishing behind a curtain. The ocean is big. It doesn't have to explain itself. Maybe that's the real horror of it. You can be halfway through a journey, feeling the wind on your face, watching the gulls, sipping your tea, and then, before the cup hits the saucer, you're gone. A name in a ledger. A ghost on the waves. And the ship may be still drifting, still waiting, still wondering what happened to you. The Cold War was a strange time. Not just nukes and spies and duck-and-cover drills, but a world where entire people could disappear into the folds of ideology, bureaucracy, or just plain shadow. Borders became fog. Truth was optional. Records vanished. And in some cases, so did the people themselves. You didn't need to be famous or powerful. You just needed to be inconvenient, or valuable, or in the wrong place at the wrong time. These are the stories of those who didn't just vanish. They evaporated into history's most paranoid decade, like whispers nobody dared to repeat. Start with Raoul Wallenberg, a Swedish diplomat who, during World War II, saved tens of thousands of Hungarian Jews by issuing them protective passports and sheltering them in safe houses. He was brave, brilliant, and relentless. In 1945, as the Red Army liberated Budapest, Wallenberg went to meet Soviet officers likely to negotiate or continue his humanitarian efforts. He was never seen again. The Soviets later claimed he died in a Moscow prison in 1947, but the records are murky. For decades, witnesses claimed to have seen him alive in Soviet psychiatric hospitals or prisons. Letters appeared, files disappeared. Sweden and Russia danced around the truth with diplomatic niceties. To this day, no one knows what really happened. A hero walked into the arms of the people he thought were allies and dissolved into the archives. Then there's Bruno Pontecorvo, a brilliant nuclear physicist. Italian-born, British-trained, deeply involved in early nuclear research. And in 1950, he simply vanished. One day he was on vacation with his family in Italy. The next, poof, no forwarding address. It took 5 years before the truth emerged. Pontecorvo had defected to the Soviet Union. He'd been a spy, possibly for years. He gave them secrets, theories, maybe more. The West was stunned. His defection wasn't just betrayal, it was embarrassment. A quiet intellect who'd been trusted, nurtured, even admired, and he had walked out mid-equation. In Moscow, he resurfaced years later as a scientist, a father, a man who never quite explained why. Just a ghost who reappeared wearing a different flag. Now, meet Harold Holt, Australia's 17th Prime Minister. In 1967, he went for a swim at Cheviot Beach near Melbourne. There were no lifeguards, and the surf was rough. He dove in, and never came out. Massive searches turned up nothing. Not a scrap of clothing, not a body. The official verdict, accidental drowning. But Australians, being Australians, couldn't leave it at that. Theories bloomed, that Holt had been taken by a Chinese submarine, that he faked his death and ran off with a lover, that he was abducted by aliens. A memorial was built. So was a swimming pool, ironically. His disappearance remains one of Australia's strangest political mysteries, a national leader who vanished into the sea, as if he belonged to it more than to the parliament. Carol Chessman was a different sort of ghost. A convicted kidnapper and robber, he spent over a decade on California's death row in the 1950s, becoming a symbol of the anti-death penalty movement. He wrote books, became a cause célèbre, protested his innocence. And then, on the day of his scheduled execution in 1960, something strange happened. A call came in to delay it, but it was misdialed, or misrouted, or mishandled. By the time the message reached the prison, the gas had already been released. There's been speculation ever since. Did he really die? Was it all too convenient? His body was cremated, his ashes scattered. No grave, no closure. Just a phone call that came too late, or perhaps exactly on time, depending on what you believe. And then we get to Anatoly Yefremov, not a name you'll find in textbooks, not a man whose face graced posters. But according to declassified fragments and whispered reports, Yefremov was a Soviet intelligence officer who simply stopped being mentioned. Around the late 1960s, his name disappears from rosters, his files redacted into oblivion. Was he a double agent? A defector? Did he get caught in the machinery of suspicion? We don't know. He may have ended up in a labor camp, or a shallow grave, or some other quiet room where people went to be forgotten. In a regime built on paperwork, the greatest punishment wasn't death, it was deletion. What ties these disappearances together isn't location or politics, it's the silence that follows. In the Cold War, absence was an art form, a strategic maneuver, a way to erase problems without drawing too much attention. Whether you were a diplomat, a scientist, a leader, or a nobody, you could be unmade with a stamp, a nod, a change in paperwork. No bullets, just bureaucracy. These stories remind us that some vanishings aren't about being lost. They're about being erased. People folded into the shadows of nations, ideologies, and fears so massive they left no room for loose ends. They didn't go missing, they were misfiled by history, locked behind redacted pages and carefully worded denials. And if they ever screamed, the sound never made it through the Iron Curtain. Some disappearances feel like doors quietly closing. Others feel like the entire hallway collapses behind them. When women go missing, especially under circumstances that make no sense, the world tends to react with something between panic and poetic speculation. Was she running? Was she taken? Was she erased by something colder and more patient than time itself? These are the cases where the facts are thin, the silence is loud, and the trail goes cold so fast it might never have existed at all. Agatha Christie was already the queen of mystery novels when, in December 1926, she became the subject of her own story. One night, after an argument with her husband, she walked out of her house and didn't come back. Her car was found abandoned near a lake, headlights still on. Inside, her coat and driver's license. For 11 days, the press exploded. The public speculated. Did she drown herself? Was it a stunt? A breakdown? A plot twist? Then she was found at a hotel in Harrogate, registered under the name of her husband's mistress, claiming amnesia. She never explained what happened, ever, to anyone. One of history's greatest mystery writers became the center of a mystery she refused to solve. It was either genius performance art, a psychic collapse, or both, and it remains the only time Agatha Christie left a story unfinished. Dorothy Arnold was a 25-year-old socialite in 1910 New York, daughter of a wealthy perfume magnate, aspiring writer, and well-dressed dreamer. One December afternoon, she left her family's mansion to go shopping for a dress. She was seen buying chocolates, talking to a friend, and then gone, vanished into the streets of Manhattan. No witnesses, no body, no ransom note. Her family, mortified by the scandal of it, didn't call the police for weeks. Rumors swirled that she'd eloped, that she was pregnant, that she'd been murdered and buried in Central Park. Private investigators found nothing. Decades passed, and every now and then, someone claimed to have seen her always in a foggy memory or a distant town. Her disappearance is now more legend than case, a cautionary tale in a fur coat. Renee McCrae was last seen in 1976, driving off with her 3-year-old son Andrew in Scotland. Her burned car was found later that night in a lay-by. The child's car seat was still inside, scorched but empty. Renee and Andrew were never seen again. Her husband's business partner, who was secretly the father of the child, became a suspect. The case stretched on for decades, with various digs and dead ends. In 2022, a man was finally convicted of her murder over 45 years after she disappeared. But Andrew? Still missing. No one knows what became of the toddler, only that the fire didn't take him. The questions still burn quietly in the background, even with a conviction. There's no such thing as full closure when half the story is still missing. The Springfield 3 is a case so strange it feels like fiction trying to impersonate reality. On June 7, 1992, in Springfield, Missouri, 2 teenage girls, Susie Streeter and Stacy McCall, spent the night celebrating high school graduation. They planned to sleep at Susie's house, where her mother, Cheryl Levitt, lived. The next morning, all 3 women were gone. Purses were still there, cigarettes unsmoked, a broken porch light. No signs of a struggle inside, just a house full of silence and unfinished plans. The girls' cars were still in the driveway. The dog was still inside. Over the years, there have been tips, theories, and even confessions, but nothing solid. They vanished not from the street, not from a vacation, but from the one place that should have been safe, home. All 3, as if the floor opened beneath them. Then there's Amy Lynn Bradley, who disappeared from a cruise ship in 1998. She was 23, traveling with her family through the Caribbean. One night, she left her balcony for a quick stroll. She was seen by crew members early that morning, and then never again. The ship docked in Curacao a few hours later. No trace of her has ever been found. There were alleged sightings of Amy over the years. Some said she was forced into sex trafficking. Others claimed she was working in brothels. One Navy officer reported seeing a woman in a bar who begged for help before being dragged away, but no evidence ever stuck. A young woman went for a walk on a floating palace and somehow slipped past all the cameras, all the doors, all the people, into the water, or into something far more hidden. These disappearances haunt more than just the families. They haunt the concept of safety. The idea that you can be surrounded by people, known by name, loved deeply, and still vanish so thoroughly that even time can't find you. These aren't stories you forget. They stay lodged in the subconscious like a loose tooth or a bad dream you almost understand. We want to believe there's always an answer. But in these cases, the answer walked off the edge of the page and never came back. Some missing persons cases feel like someone took a magnet to reality's hard drive. They don't line up, don't compute, and don't obey the rules we think the world runs on. These aren't ordinary disappearances. These are the ones that feel like the universe hiccuped, like someone pressed pause, rewound the tape, or let the dream logic bleed into daytime. People vanish in ways that suggest reality might have bugs in its software. These are the cases that whisper, "You weren't supposed to see this." Take Brandon Swanson. In 2008, the 19-year-old called his parents after his car went into a ditch in rural Minnesota. It was just past midnight. He sounded frustrated but not panicked. They stayed on the phone with him for 47 minutes while he walked along what he thought was a gravel road toward a town. Then he suddenly said, "Oh shit," and the line went dead. Police traced the call and found his car, but it wasn't near where he thought he was. Searchers found no sign of Brandon. Not his phone, not his hat, not his body. He'd been talking, walking, fully aware, and engaged. And then nothing. It's as if the landscape itself swallowed him. And the, "oh shit," that's all we get. One last breadcrumb dropped at the edge of a glitch. Then there's Stephen Kubacki, a college student who went skiing near Lake Michigan in 1978. His gear was found abandoned near footprints that led out onto the ice, then stopped, presumed dead. Until 15 months later, when he woke up in a field in Massachusetts, 700 miles away, with no memory of the missing year. He was wearing unfamiliar clothes, carrying a backpack with maps, and had grown a beard. He didn't appear injured. He didn't want to be hypnotized or probed for answers. He just wanted to get back to school. To this day, he refuses to talk about what happened. Kubacki went for a ski trip, fell into a narrative hole, and emerged with an entire season of his life redacted. Not dead, just paused. And if you've ever looked up unsettling airport footage, you know the case of Lars Mittank, a 28-year-old German man on vacation in Bulgaria in 2014. He got into a minor scuffle, had ear pain, and was advised not to fly right away. At the airport, he started behaving strangely, paranoid, anxious. He texted his mom saying they were after him. Then, captured on CCTV, he's seen sprinting out of the terminal, abandoning his luggage, running through a field and disappearing into the woods. Gone. No further sightings. Some think he had a psychotic break. Others whisper about foul play. Or maybe he saw something he wasn't supposed to. Whatever the reason, he turned an airport, a place built on structure, tracking, and timetables into the starting line of a vanishing act that's never made sense. Sneha Ann Phillips' story is so tangled in time that it almost breaks causality. She was a physician in New York, last seen the night of September 10, 2001. She went shopping downtown and was possibly seen again the next morning. Then the towers fell. Her apartment was just blocks away. She wasn't officially added to the 9/11 victim list for years because there was no conclusive proof she had been there. Her final movements are blurry, her personal life complex, her timeline riddled with contradiction. Did she run toward the chaos to help? Was she already gone before it began? Or did the most documented disaster in history swallow her into the chaos, leaving nothing but digital fragments and a missing name in the smoke? Even her inclusion on memorials became a point of bureaucratic debate, as if her memory hovered at the edge of two possible worlds. And then there's the Tom and Shud case. You probably know it as the Somerton Man mystery, a man found dead on an Australian beach in 1948, well-dressed, no ID, and no cause of death. In his pocket, a scrap of paper that read, Tamam Shud, Persian for, "It is ended." in a hidden pocket in his clothing. Police later found a copy of the Rubaiyat, with a code scrawled inside and a phone number. For decades, no one knew who he was or why he died. But just when you think the case can't get weirder, it turns out there may have been a nearly identical case just across the water. Another man, same era, same book, same page torn out. Possibly the same cause of death, possibly connected, but not quite provable. Like someone ran the same simulation twice, hoping nobody would notice the copy-paste error. These are not normal crimes or typical vanishings. These are rips in the wallpaper of the real. They make us squint at coincidence. They make rational explanations look flimsy. And they linger because they don't resolve, they loop. They hum like forgotten frequencies in the background of our understanding, reminding us that the map is not the territory. And sometimes people step off the page into something we don't have words for. Maybe they're out there still, or maybe they slipped through a crack only they could see. Either way, these are the mysteries that make you want to double-check the ground beneath your feet. Just in case. Disappearing is one thing. Being disappeared is another. When politics gets involved, people don't just vanish, they get edited. Lives turn into rumors, bodies into metaphors. Sometimes it's intentional. A threat, a cover-up, a power move. Sometimes it's just that the machinery of nations grinds too loudly for one person's voice to be heard anymore. These are the vanishings that still echo in courtrooms, classrooms, and conspiracy forums. Because when powerful people or people tied to power go missing, the silence left behind tends to get filled with everything but peace. Take Michael Rockefeller, the son of New York Governor and Vice President Nelson Rockefeller. In 1961, 23-year-old Michael was on an anthropological trip to Dutch New Guinea, fascinated by the local Asmat culture. His catamaran capsized off the coast. He swam for shore. That was the last time anyone officially saw him. The Dutch and the Rockefellers launched a massive search. Nothing, no body, no gear, just currents and hearsay. Then rumors began to swirl that Michael had made it to land and was killed, possibly eaten, by locals as part of a ritual or retribution for earlier colonial violence. Some Asmat elders would later quietly affirm the tale, decades after the fact. Others denied it. The Rockefeller family never confirmed it. His fate remains technically lost at sea, but the cannibal narrative clings like saltwater, a myth, a maybe, an unresolved chapter in a very public lineage. Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance, though, needs no mythology. It is mythology. The powerful and corrupt leader of the Teamsters Union, Hoffa disappeared in 1975 after heading to a meeting in suburban Detroit. He was planning a comeback. Not everyone wanted that. His car was found in the parking lot. He wasn't. No body, no confirmed sightings. Just an endless parade of suspects and theories. Mob hits, buried beneath stadiums, ground into scrap metal, cremated in a funeral home furnace. The FBI followed leads for decades. Deathbed confessions came and went. Excavators dug up fields, pools, and driveways. Nothing stuck. Hoffa simply left the building and became an idiom. To pull a Hoffa now means disappearing with style and secrets, and possibly cement shoes. Beatriz Allende's story is quieter, but no less tragic. The daughter of Chilean President Salvador Allende, the one overthrown in the 1973 military coup led by Pinochet, she was a physician, activist, and socialist, fiercely loyal to her father's vision. After the coup, she fled to Cuba with her family, a political exile among allies. But exile doesn't always mean safety. In 1977, Beatriz died by suicide in Havana, leaving behind children and a legacy wrapped in grief and revolution. Some say it was despair. Others say she knew too much, or had become too symbolically powerful to remain. What's certain is that she vanished from history textbooks almost immediately. A woman with lineage and ideology who couldn't find a place in the aftermath. And so the silence swallowed her too. And then there's the curious case of the white bird. In 1927, French pilots Charles Nungesser and François Colli attempted a transatlantic flight from Paris to New York 2 weeks before Lindbergh would famously make his own solo crossing. Their plane, L'Oiseau Blanc, the white bird, took off and was last seen over the coast of Ireland. After that, nothing. No radio signal, no distress call, just open ocean. Decades later, stories emerged from Newfoundland and Maine, people claiming to have seen a strange biplane crashing or heard the engine pass overhead. Some wreckage was even rumored to exist in the forests. But no proof ever surfaced. In France, the white bird became a ghost of national pride, a flight that might have made history if only it hadn't disappeared into the sky's wide parentheses. Somewhere out there, under moss or sea, might still be the skeleton of a dream, resting where no flags were ever planted. Bo Xilai, on the other hand, didn't go missing, he was made to disappear. Once a rising star in the Chinese Communist Party, Bo was charismatic, powerful, and popular, especially during his time governing Chongqing. He pushed Maoist nostalgia, cracked down on crime, and was seen by many as a contender for the very top. Then his top lieutenant, Wang Lijun, fled to a U.S. consulate with secrets. The scandal exploded. Bo's wife was implicated in the murder of a British businessman. Bo himself was accused of corruption, abuse of power, and general political insubordination. He was swiftly purged, tried, and sentenced to life in prison. But then came the strange silence. Footage vanished, statements were vague. His name became a blank space. In a state built on control, Bo Xilai became the cautionary tale. Disappear not because you ran, but because you stood out. Because in tightly wound systems, visibility can be more dangerous than invisibility. These political disappearances don't happen in isolation. They ripple. They make you question who writes history, who buries its bodies, and how easily powerful people can become cautionary legends. Some of them vanish into oceans, others into ideology, others into the redacted sections of government archives. But they all leave something behind, a question shaped like a human being. And the longer you look at it, the harder it gets to blink away. There's something especially cruel about the disappearance of a child. Adults vanish with baggage, secrets, and choices. Children just vanish from living rooms, sidewalks, birthday parties, and the void left behind feels colder than most. These aren't just cases. They're fractures in the world's sense of safety, echoes that never quite fade. Some names become symbols. Some never make it that far. All of them leave the same ache. How does someone so small leave such a massive silence? Etan Patz was 6 years old in 1979 when he left his family's Manhattan apartment to walk to the school bus stop alone for the first time. He never made it. His face was among the first to be printed on milk cartons, making him the symbol of every parent's nightmare. For decades, his case haunted the country. Every few years, a new lead, a new confession, a new excavation. In 2017, a man named Pedro Hernandez was convicted of Etan's murder based on a confession that never quite made full sense. There was no body, no physical evidence, just a story told too late and believed just enough. Etan's legacy is heavy, not in justice, but in the awareness he sparked. A single child who reshaped how America looked at streets, strangers, and the terrifying possibility of what could be waiting just around the corner. Madeleine McCann became a household name across continents when she disappeared from a holiday resort in Portugal in 2007. She was just shy of 4 years old. Her parents had left her and her siblings asleep in the apartment while they dined nearby. When they returned, Madeleine was gone. What followed was a media storm unlike anything before. Paparazzi, press conferences, international investigations, suspects, psychics, documentaries. Theories bloomed that she was abducted, trafficked, accidentally harmed, even that her parents were involved. But there's no conclusion, no confirmed sighting. Just the same photograph of a smiling little girl, eyes wide and haunting, aging only through digital renderings, while the rest of the world moved on, more uncertain than ever. Kyron Horman was 7 years old when he vanished from Skyline Elementary School in Portland, Oregon, in 2010. He was at a science fair. His stepmother said she dropped him off and watched him walk toward his class, but no one saw him after that. No teacher marked him present. No surveillance caught him leaving. The school was locked down, searched top to bottom. Nothing. It's as if he walked into the building and simply faded out. His stepmother quickly became the focus of suspicion, inconsistent statements, strained family dynamics, and a restraining order. But no arrests, no solid evidence. Just questions, and a missing child whose backpack was packed with everything but a way home. Mary Boyle's case is less known globally, but in Ireland, it's a wound that never healed. In 1977, 6-year-old Mary went missing while visiting her grandparents' farm in County Donegal. She'd been walking with her uncle and, at some point, turned back alone toward the house. She never arrived. What followed was one of the largest manhunts in Irish history. No trace was ever found. Rumors of cover-ups, political pressure, and familial tension persist to this day. Several people claim to know what happened. No charges were filed. The landscape where she vanished is still walked by those searching not for hope anymore, but for bones. Mary's name still surfaces in the Irish press, in whispered accusations and long silences at dinner tables across the country. The Beaumont children, Jane, Arna, and Grant, were all under the age of 10 when they took a short trip to Glenelg Beach near Adelaide, Australia, in 1966. It was a normal summer day. They were meant to return by noon. They never did. Witnesses reported seeing the trio playing, walking with an unknown man, eating meat pies. After that, nothing. The beach gave back no answers. Their parents, heartbroken and publicly scrutinized, became symbols of grief in a country that lost not just 3 children, but a sense of innocence. Over the decades, suspects were named and dismissed. Sites were excavated. Letters surfaced, some fake, some eerie. Every few years, a new theory revives the pain. A family day out became a national trauma that lingers like heat off the sand. What ties these stories together isn't just the loss, it's the unfinishedness. The way they sit in time like open doors, letting in wind and speculation. These children didn't choose to vanish. They didn't pack a bag or leave a note. They were taken, lost, misplaced by a world that refuses to admit it doesn't know where to look. We remember them not just because they're missing, but because their names became lighthouses, flashing, steady, always waiting for someone to return. Some disappearances are strange, others are suspicious. And then there are those that just shouldn't have been possible. These are the cases where logic folds in on itself, where the timeline feels warped, and where someone often smart, significant, or simply in the wrong place at the wrong time goes, poof, gone. No explanation that fully satisfies. No answer that truly settles. They're the ones you reread and go, wait, what? The kinds of vanishings that make reality feel like it's being run on experimental software. Ray Gricker was the district attorney of Center County, Pennsylvania, a well-dressed, quiet man in his late 50s, known for his calm demeanor and, notably, for declining to press charges against a very specific football coach in 1,998 years before that decision would age poorly in every conceivable way. In 2005, Gricar told his girlfriend he was going for a drive. His car was later found in a parking lot near the Susquehanna River. A week later, his laptop was found in the river minus the hard drive. The hard drive itself was found months later, downstream, damaged beyond recovery. His phone was gone. His body was gone. Some believe he staged his own disappearance to start a new life. Others think he was silenced. Theories include suicide, abduction, and espionage-level erasure. But for someone so organized and visible to vanish so completely, that's the part that doesn't sit right. It's not just that he's gone, it's that he took his secrets with him. Henry Hudson, the explorer you've probably heard of thanks to a river and a bay bearing his name, had a much less tidy ending. In 1000, 611, during an expedition to find the Northwest Passage. His crew decided they'd had enough of the cold, the leadership, and the lack of progress. So they mutinied. Hudson, his teenage son, and a few loyal men were set adrift in a small boat in the icy waters of what's now Hudson Bay. They were never seen again. No bones, no boat, no signs of struggle. The mutineers made it back to England and faced minimal consequences. Hudson just exited stage left. The man who mapped thousands of miles of coastlines became a legend, lost in his own cartography. He searched for a way through the top of the world, and in doing so, disappeared into it. And yes, we're coming back to the Sodder children, because no list of impossible disappearances is complete without them. In 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder home caught fire on Christmas Eve. George and Jenny Sodder escaped with 4 of their 10 children. The remaining 5, allegedly trapped inside, were never seen again. But the weirdness began almost immediately. No remains were found. The fire didn't burn hot enough or long enough to reduce bodies to nothing. The family claimed to have heard strange noises on the roof before the fire. A ladder that was always nearby was suddenly missing. Years later, a photo arrived in the mail, a young man who resembled one of the missing boys, with cryptic writing on the back. The Sodders spent decades chasing leads. They even put up a billboard on the highway, begging for answers. None came. Whether the children died, were kidnapped, or grew up unaware of who they were, no one can say. But a house burned, and history melted with it. D.B. Cooper, on the other hand, wanted to disappear and might have pulled it off. In 1971, a man calling himself Dan Cooper hijacked a Northwest Orient flight, claimed he had a bomb, demanded 204 parachutes, then leapt from the plane into the stormy forests of the Pacific Northwest. Wearing a suit and tie, with sunglasses and a cigarette, the FBI scoured the woods. A small stash of money was found buried years later near the Columbia River, but no body, no chute, no sign of impact. Whether he died mid-fall or vanished into the pines to live off the grid, D.B. Cooper pulled off something few people ever do. He committed a federal crime, looked good doing it, and walked away into folklore. Some say he was a disgruntled veteran. Others think he never existed at all. But Cooper didn't just jump out of a plane, he jumped out of the story, leaving behind only questions and a perfectly folded tie. And finally, we reach the green children of Woolpit. Maybe less literal, maybe less provable, but no less strange. According to medieval English legend, 2 children appeared in the village of Woolpit in the 12th century, a brother and sister. Their skin was green. They spoke no known language. They wore unfamiliar clothing. Eventually, they learned English and explained, or tried to, that they came from a place with no sun, only twilight. The boy died young, but the girl survived and assimilated, allegedly marrying a local man. She claimed her people lived underground, and they'd become lost after following the sound of bells. It reads like folklore, but some historians argue it may be a garbled memory of Flemish refugees or abandoned children. Still, green skin, unknown tongue, lost in the woods? It's a bedtime story that forgot to end. Were they aliens? Feral children? Echoes from a collapsed timeline? There's no evidence beyond the legend. But like most great mysteries, the lack of evidence is half the fun. These are the disappearances that never should have happened. People too watched, too significant, too grounded to just not be there anymore. Yet here we are, still wondering where they went and what part of the script broke to let them slip through. Whether it's fire, water, clouds, mutiny, or myth, some exits are so clean they feel like erasures. And sometimes, the more we search for the missing, the more reality starts to look like it's missing a few pieces, too.